This has to be the strangest animation I've ever made. I guess that it's not that strange depending on which point of view you come from, but for me personally this is like completely different from the kind of animations that I normally create. It was a big learning experience for me in that way. So yeah, I'm just gonna talk about it in this video and maybe you'll learn something, maybe you will gain an insight into how a music video like this is made. Also, I just want to let you guys know that like, hey, I made a music video again, and it's now out online and you can watch it. The full music video has just released. It's on Osius Klein's channel, so please go and show your support for it. I would really appreciate it. Go and watch the video, leave a nice comment. The link to that is in the description. I'll probably put something here about it. So this is my second music video for Osius Klein. When I was briefed on the project and listened to NSFW, I quickly realized that if I was going to make a music video of this song, it was going to have to be different from what I normally create. And that's not just because of the kind of music that it is. You know, it's quite a strange track. But it's also because of the limitations that we had. So I needed to get a 4-minute music video made in the space of 4 weeks. So that's 1 minute of animation per week on average. So I needed to break free from those tendencies and think like outside the box if I was gonna make a music video in this amount of time. With Falling Stars, it was more like music visuals that were repetitive. They were repeating themselves and it's kind of like a moving picture. I kind of took that further in this one, but also wanted to create something different to match the style of the music. And I'm gonna kind of explain to you the decision-making process. So vision, I think it's always important when you're setting out to make something to visualize where it's going to be shown and who's going to be watching it and how are they watching it. That might mean that people are watching it on a computer screen, on YouTube, on the YouTube page, and it's in this little box and they watch it there, on their phone, in a cinema screen. In this case, it would actually be on a big stage with a big sort of LCD screen and flashing lights and high octane music, people on their feet. That was part of my decision making. At the end result, I was imagining being in that crowd and watching Osius Klein rock out on stage with this behind him. And I think that's really important if you're making a film. I also wanted to not take too much away from the music. I wasn't going to be saying a lot in this animation that hadn't already been said in the way that the music was created. The visuals are kind of like more of a supplement to the music, I suppose. Limitations. So a major factor at play here was our time limitation. 1 minute of animation per week on average. That is massive. That's a massive amount of work in very little time. And so that pretty much ruled out frame by frame animation. You couldn't make a 4-minute frame by frame animation in that time. It just wouldn't be feasible. From these factors, these limitations, I decided to turn my attention towards alternative forms of animation and to create a series of experimental particle effects and then to see how I could kind of edit them into the form of a video to match the feeling that the music gave. Whilst this is mostly the kind of visuals that you have, we also wanted to work in the overall story of the album, because the album does have a kind of story to it and it has characters, it has a world that we worked hard to establish in Falling Stars. I felt that there was also this very loose story being told in this track in particular. It's a very heavy song and it's got these crazy vocal samples which I had no idea what they were saying. This faintly gave me the idea that the video could be about understanding, or rather translation, and how sometimes we speak to each other and we don't understand each other, and there's a sort of frustration that comes out of not understanding what someone is saying. So that was the kind of theme that I chose, was translation. I'm not sure if that came through in the end, but that's definitely what I was going for. As well as that, we have the story arc of Kota, this girl who is trying to reunite with her best friend, who has gone to this island, this fantasy island with these old gods. So part of that world that we constructed, there is this sort of runic symbolism in the world. Coincidentally, it played very nicely into that theme of translation and not understanding. Production and experiments. Once I had listened to the track many times, I thought about it for a long time, then I put the track away, didn't listen to it, opened up Adobe After Effects. I started making experiments again with these particle effects. I used a software called Trapcode Suite. Most of the experiments I came up with a variety of particle generated experiments. Jason then greenlit a few of them, said he likes them, so I pursued them more and created more variations on them. There were also a lot of little breaks in the beat where there is like vocal samples or some kind of sound effect or some kind of climax. So for them, I would often create a small piece of custom animation just to fill those gaps and to sort of describe what the sound is to me. So some of them were done in Trapcode Tau, some of them were made from Flash, from motion tweening, and some of them I used frame-by-frame animation. But yeah, they were small pieces, and I made sure to use the resources that I had available so that I wasn't going over time, over budget. So here's a little breakdown of each section. For the intro, the first thing I heard with this track is this Vocaloid sound. So I thought I would try and describe the sound of this Vocaloid, but in a very simple way, like a circle, a bit like inspired by Apple or something. I did this in Flash actually. It was mostly just a combination of tweening and frame by frame, so it felt like it was talking to you in some weird way. And so I figured I would have this circle be corrupted and turn into like a broken rune. So the first particle effect, this was the first simulation I made, and I found the way the particles assembled into these rows to be quite hypnotic. So I decided to keep them in these uniform rows and just move the virtual camera through them. Because Osiris Klein gave me access to the stems of the tracks, I was able to link up specific layers of the tracks to different elements in the composition. The sound of the bass kick, I hooked that up specifically to the runic symbol in the middle, so that would just sort of jump out at you when the bass hit. And I also affected the scale node on the particle effects so that they did the same thing but for the snare. And I found that this looked much better than just hooking them all up to the overall waveform, because you have distinct things moving at different times. It's a better representation of the music sound. But one of the main experiments that I did, so I reduced down the Y particles so that there were only 2 layers, and then I increased the particles in Z and X. So yeah, it's a lot of fiddling to do one of these things, but basically that's what it is. It's 2 sheets like that, and then I got really close like that, so it created this sort of this effect, which was quite inspired by 2001 Space Odyssey actually. If you've ever seen 2001 Space Odyssey, they've got this sort of, when he goes through this into this different dimension, well, there's this kind of effect which I have no idea how they did, but this is kind of like inspired by that. And then I sent waveform signals through the particles so that they would move up and down slightly to represent the waveform. And I also sent textures through them and things, so that's how we ended up with this effect. They just move backwards away from the camera, and then I put the rune symbols through there. Gave it a tint and messed about with all kinds of other properties. So in a very short space of time I was able to create what looked like a very complex visual phenomenon. So the vortex effects, I was really against time here, and I was just thinking, how can I make this look different without spending loads of time doing it? The time limitation really forced me to just think of like different things. One of them I tried was just turning the whole thing, like having it turn around. When you made the whole thing rotate, it kind of put me quite off balance. If that's on a bigger screen in front of you, the effect would be even more so. I really liked that about it, and I figured that if I was in this mad rave, it would really heighten the experience of where you lose track of where you are. The silhouettes, this is the first part of the sort of lull in the track where it calms down a bit. I wanted to play about with the silhouettes of the characters, so in one of my experiments I contained the particle effect, the rose particle effect, within the silhouette of each character. I think that turned out pretty well. I sent that to Jason and he said that it looks good, but the characters' silhouettes aren't quite distinct enough. So then I created this glow around the silhouettes, and that kind of solved the problem. So for the running sequence, this is one of the only times where I used traditional frame-by-frame animation in there. And I know I wasn't going to do any frame-by-frame animation, but I had such a strong vision when listening to this part of the track that I really wanted to just have Kota running to Riz, and for Riz to be walking just a slow walk, and for Kota to just never catch up. It did cost me more time to create the animation of the run cycle and the walk cycle, but I did save some time when coloring, because I made it all the same color. I colored it all blue. The computer basically took care of the coloring process. I didn't have to go in there and manually color much. So I researched these salt flats and I found pictures of this amazing lake in Bolivia. It's a salt lake which sometimes fills with a very thin layer of water. When it does, you can walk on it and it creates a perfect reflection of the sky beneath you. It's an amazing image and I would love to go there someday to experience it for myself. To make it part of the world that we were creating, I just incorporated some of the runes into the sky as these big sort of astral phenomenons which look like they're affected by the atmosphere a little bit. And I think the image really came together in the end. Just from putting those runes in, it gave it that consistency with the rest of the shots, and yeah, really happy with how this one turned out. We created these caption cards for towards the end of the animation. This was Jason's idea. We looked at this scene from Monogatari, which is a popular anime, and Jason had the idea to incorporate these cards to match the sound bites. An idea we took from that series. Another interesting thing that I never would have thought of doing. So the big bass drop. This shot was a lot of fun to make. I made an animation which just switched over the different rune symbols, and then I hooked that animation up to the waveform of the track again for the side pieces. For the end shot, this was based on another default setting, this time in Trapcode's Tau, which caught my eye when I was looking through them, and I felt like it worked because that synth is just so full-on explosion of color. It's almost like all the different hues of color are contained within this vortex thing. As the synth shuts down and they just drained the color from the image. The video starts out with a circle and then also ends with a circle, and circles are found all within the piece, so it just brought a bit of consistency to the madness of the animation. I'm not really sure how to conclude this. The takeaway from this would be to occasionally say yes to interesting projects that you wouldn't normally say yes to, and to sort of ignore your qualifications. So don't worry if you're not qualified for something. If you haven't done something before, that's not a reason to not do it. You might need to follow some tutorials. I know I followed a lot of After Effects tutorials on YouTube to manage to do it. Don't limit yourself with what you believe you can do. If you want to do a music video with particle effects, you can do it. And I guess the other important takeaway is that obviously you're gonna groan when you hear that there's a small amount of time to do it. Obviously it's not convenient, but it is a good thing for creativity, especially when you actually can't do what you would normally do in an animation. It forces you to take a different approach. This isn't really a lesson though, it's just a little breakdown of the music video that I created, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks very much to Osias Klein for commissioning me to create it, of course, and yeah, go over, subscribe to him. He'll be releasing more things in the future, I'm sure. And yeah, if you haven't already, I would invite you to subscribe to the channel. I bring out new videos either every week or every 2 weeks. And if you want to support what I do here and support the production of these videos, help me make them long into the future, I would really appreciate your consideration for Patreon. Patreon is a platform which I use to get more content out and to produce more content and to basically make this channel sustainable. If the Patreons that I have right now didn't support me, this channel wouldn't be sustainable. So every small amount that is pledged really helps this channel. Oh, one more thing, we've also just released another video on the second channel, Animator Guild Community. Thank you for everyone who participated in the character design challenge. Go take a look at it. I hope you enjoy it, and thank you very much. See you in the next video. Goodbye.